Little girl ran to the Hells Angel biker crying he's coming. When he heard the reason, he stormed out. A filthy, barefoot little girl runs into a desert biker bar and collapses at the feet of the most feared Hells Angel in the room. Through tears, she whispers just 3 words. He's coming. The man with the badge. At first it sounds like fear, but then the biker realizes the truth. This child didn't run from the law. She escaped it. She's hiding from a secret operation pretending to protect kids, while making them disappear. And worse, she's the last living witness to a massacre he was framed for years ago. Now the people with badges are closing in. The world already thinks he's a monster. But will he run? Or will he burn the whole lie down to save her before they erase her forever? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The late afternoon sun bore down mercilessly on the Devil's Spur, a weathered biker bar standing defiant against the endless Mojave Desert. Heat waves danced across the cracked pavement where motorcycles sat in neat rows, their metal surfaces still ticking as they cooled in the shade. Inside, dust motes floated through shafts of amber light that streamed through grimy windows, painting everything in a hazy glow. Cal Grim Harlan occupied his usual spot at the far end of the scarred wooden bar, nursing a glass of warm water. His massive frame cast a long shadow across the floor, and his weathered leather vest creaked softly when he moved. The other patrons gave him a wide berth, not out of fear, exactly, but from a deep-rooted respect for the unspoken rules that governed places like this. His presence alone seemed to keep the usual rowdiness in check. The heavy wooden doors suddenly burst open with a bang that made glasses rattle. Bright sunlight flooded the dim interior, and in its glare stood a tiny figure. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, swayed unsteadily on bare, dirt-covered feet. Her blonde hair was matted and tangled, her pink t-shirt torn and stained. Fresh scratches marked her arms and legs, telling a story of desperate flight through rough terrain. The usual background noise of muttered conversations and clinking glasses died instantly. Every head turned to stare as the child stumbled forward, her wide eyes darting frantically around the room. She was breathing in short, panicked gasps, tears cutting clean trails through the dirt on her face. Something in Cal stirred, an old protective instinct he thought he'd buried years ago. He watched as the girl's gaze fixed on him, recognition flickering in her eyes, though they'd never met. Perhaps it was his size, or maybe something in his steady expression. But she made her choice in that moment. She ran straight to him, bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Before anyone could react, she had pressed herself against his legs, small fingers clutching desperately at his leather vest. Her whole body shook with sobs as she tried to speak through hitching breaths. "Please," she whimpered, looking up at him with terror-filled eyes. The man with the badge, he's coming." Cal's hands, capable of so much violence, moved with surprising gentleness as he lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, and up close he could see the bruises, dark purple marks on her arms in the shape of adult fingers, older yellow patches visible beneath the dirt on her neck. His jaw tightened, and something cold and familiar settled in his chest. The bar had gone deathly quiet. Even the most hardened bikers looked uncomfortable at the sight of an obviously abused child. Cal cradled her carefully, noting how she flinched at first before pressing her face into his vest, her small body still trembling. Someone near the window cursed softly. "Hey, Grim, you might want to hear this." In the distance, growing steadily closer, came the distinctive wail of police sirens. The sound seemed to trigger fresh panic in the girl, who clutched Cal's vest tighter, her knuckles white with fear. Cal's expression didn't change, but his mind was already racing through options. The bruises told one story, but the terror in her eyes at the sound of approaching law enforcement told another, one that struck uncomfortably close to home. He'd seen corruption wear a badge before, had paid the price for standing against it. The sirens grew louder, their howl bouncing off the desert rocks. Other patrons shifted uneasily, some drifting toward the back exit, others pretending to focus on their drinks. The girl's breathing quickened again, and Cal felt her tears soaking through his shirt. The afternoon heat still shimmered outside, but inside the Devil's Spur, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Cal knew that trouble wasn't something abstract anymore. It was racing toward them down the sun-baked highway, announced by those approaching sirens. His hand absently stroked the girl's hair, a gesture of comfort that surprised even him, while his other hand remained ready near his hip. The window glass vibrated with the growing wail of sirens, and dust swirled in the parking lot as vehicles approached. The child in his arms whimpered again, and Cal felt that long-dormant protective instinct surge fully awake. Whatever was coming through those doors, whatever badge it wore, would have to go through him first. The sirens grew closer, their wail echoing off the desert rocks. Cal's mind shifted into tactical mode, years of experience taking over. He scanned the room with practiced efficiency, noting exits, cover points, and potential threats. The girl in his arms trembled with each new sound. "Listen up," he called out, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Clear out, now." The authority in his tone brooked no argument. Bikers and regulars alike began moving. Toward the exits, some casting concerned glances at the child, others simply eager to avoid involvement. Cal turned to Mickey, the weathered bartender who'd seen it all. "Lock up behind us. Anyone asks, you closed early. Heat got to the coolers." Mickey nodded, already gathering his keys. With careful movements that wouldn't startle the girl, Cal carried her through the heavy door leading to the clubhouse's back rooms. These weren't just storage spaces. They were fortified sanctuary, built decades ago by paranoid veterans who understood the value of secure walls and hidden exits. The girl's fingers remained twisted in his vest as he moved through the dim corridor. Each step revealed more details that made his blood run cold. Defensive wounds on her forearms, needle marks in the crook of her elbow, the kind of terror that came from systematic abuse rather than a single incident. He picked the most defensible room, one with thick concrete walls and a steel door. Inside was sparse but clean, a cot, a small bathroom, basic supplies. Cal tried to set her down, but she clung tighter. "You're safe here," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Nobody gets through that door without going through me first." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she loosened her grip slightly. Cal retrieved the first aid kit from its wall mount. "I need to clean those cuts, may I?" He waited for her small nod before beginning, noting how she watched his every movement like a trapped animal. "My name's Cal," he offered, carefully dabbing antiseptic on a nasty scrape. "Some folks call me Grim." She winced at the sting, but didn't pull away. I'm Lily," she whispered, then flinched when someone's motorcycle roared to life outside. "It's okay, Lily. Just people leaving." He noticed how she trembled at any sudden noise, the crackle of Mickey's radio downstairs, voices carrying through vents, even the gentle whoosh of the ancient air conditioning. As he worked, she began to talk in broken sentences, each word seeming to cost her tremendous effort. They said they were helpers, had badges like real police. Her voice caught. "But police don't lock kids in rooms with no windows." Cal's hands remained steady, but his jaw tightened. How many others? He asked softly. Lots. Different rooms. Lily's eyes squeezed shut. They gave us shots. Said it was medicine, but it made everything fuzzy. She rubbed unconsciously at the marks on her arm. There was a special symbol on their papers, like a snake eating its tail, with numbers inside. Cal's fingers froze for a fraction of a second. He knew that symbol, an Ouroboros containing a classified task force number. He'd seen it on documents years ago, right before everything in his life went sideways. Did they say certain words? Special phrases? He kept his tone casual, but his heart was pounding. Lily nodded slowly. Prosperity through progress. They said it every morning, like a prayer. Her voice dropped even lower. And sometimes they talked about Protocol 7 when they thought we were sleeping. Each word hit Cal like a physical blow. This wasn't random. This was the same shadow organization that had framed him for that massacre. The same people who'd buried evidence and manufactured lies. They were still operating, still hurting people. But now they'd graduated from eliminating witnesses to experimenting on children. He finished bandaging her wounds in silence, mind racing. The girl had escaped from something far bigger and darker than local corruption. The fact that she'd found him, of all people, couldn't be coincidence. Either someone had guided her here, or fate had a twisted sense of humor. Evening crept in, painting the desert in deep purples and reds. Cal got Lily settled on the cot with water and some simple food Mickey had brought up. She fell into an exhausted sleep almost immediately, but her face remained tense even in rest. Cal positioned himself outside the room, back against the steel door. Through the small window, he could see the parking lot and the road beyond. Night was settling in properly now, bringing with it the desert's peculiar silence. He checked his weapon, more out of habit than immediate need. His past hadn't just found him. It had kicked down his door and dropped a traumatized child in his lap. The same people who'd destroyed his life were still out there, still operating with impunity. But this time was different. This time he had irrefutable proof in the form of a brave little girl who'd escaped their grasp. The desert darkness deepened, and Cal remained at his post, motionless but alert. Behind him, Lily slept fitfully, occasionally whimpering in her dreams. Each sound strengthened his resolve. He'd failed to stop them before, had paid for his attempt with years of his life. But looking at those needle marks, those bruises on a child, he knew with absolute certainty that this time, failure wasn't an option. The desert night wrapped around the Devil's Spur like a heavy blanket, bringing with it an unsettling stillness. Cal remained at his post outside the safe room, his broad shoulders pressed against the steel door as he listened to Lily's uneven breathing through the thick metal. Each whimper and restless movement from within tightened the knot in his stomach. In the darkness, memories he'd spent years burying began to surface. The task force badge glinting in fluorescent light. Documents marked with that same snake symbol. The warehouse where everything went wrong. He remembered the gunfire, the screams, the evidence that vanished before he could present it. The frame job had been perfect. No loose ends, no witnesses, just Cal Grim Harlan taking the fall for a massacre he'd tried to prevent. His weathered hands clenched into fists. He'd learned to live with the weight of those deaths, carried the burden of his failure to stop it. But now, with Lily's words echoing in his mind, old wounds were tearing open. Around 3 a.m, Mickey brought up fresh coffee. "You should get some rest, brother," he whispered, but Cal just shook his head. Sleep wasn't an option, not with his past literally breathing in the next room. Dawn began to paint the horizon in pale gold when a piercing scream cut through the silence. Cal was through the door in seconds, finding Lily thrashing against invisible restraints, her eyes wide with terror. "Lily," he called softly, keeping his distance. "You're safe. It's Cal. You're at the Devil's Spur." Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes, and she drew her knees to her chest, wrapping thin arms around them. "I saw them again," she whispered. "In my sleep, the other kids." Cal pulled up a chair, careful to leave plenty of space between them. "You want to tell me about it?" Lily's fingers twisted in the blanket. "We were being moved. 3 vans. They always moved us at night." Her voice grew stronger, clearer than it had been yesterday. "Something went wrong with one of the vans. I heard shouting, then gunshots." She pressed her face against her knees. "I got thrown around when our van crashed. The door came open a little bit. Everyone was screaming and running, but I..." Her shoulders shook. "I crawled under the van. I could see everything through the gap." Cal's heart pounded against his ribs. "What did you see, Lily?" Men in black uniforms. Different from the usual guards. They had special guns. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "They shot everyone. Even the other guards. Even the kids who were just crying and trying to hide." The familiar taste of bile rose in Cal's throat. He knew exactly what she was describing. He'd seen those same tactical teams, wielded those same specially modified weapons. "When was this, Lily?" 4 days ago." She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "I stayed under the van for a long time. When it got quiet, I ran into the desert. I walked forever, hiding when cars came. Then I saw your bar and..." She glanced up at him. "Something told me it was safe." Cal's hands were shaking now, something that hadn't happened in years. "Lily," he said carefully, "what you saw, that wasn't the first time they've done something like that, was it?" She shook her head. "They clean up their mistakes. That's what they call it. When something goes wrong, or when kids get too sick from the tests." Her voice trailed off. "Does anyone else know what you saw? Did you tell anyone?" "Just you." Lily's eyes met his, carrying a weight no child should have to bear. "And my mom, before." Cal's breath caught. "Your mother?" Lily nodded slowly. "She worked for them, as a nurse, but she was different. She tried to help us." Her lower lip trembled. "One day she came to my room really scared. She said if I ever got away, I should find the man they called Grim. She said you tried to stop them before, that you were the only one who ever stood up to them." The words hit Cal like a physical blow. He remembered Sarah Moreno, the quiet nurse who'd slipped him information, who'd disappeared 2 days before everything went sideways. He'd always assumed she'd been another victim of the cleanup crew. "Your mother?" he said softly. "Her name was Sarah?" Lily's eyes widened. "You knew her?" "She was brave," Cal said, his voice rough. "She tried to help me expose what they were doing. I couldn't..." He had to stop, collect himself. "I couldn't save her, or stop them." "She said you would help me." Lily's voice was barely a whisper now. "She made me memorize your name, what you looked like. Said if I ever saw you, I should tell you everything." Cal stood, pacing the small room as dawn light streamed through the high window. Sarah had known they were coming for her. She'd prepared her daughter, planted seeds that might take years to bloom. And now here was Lily, living proof of everything he'd failed to prove before, the witness he'd needed 15 years too late. Looking at her small form huddled on the cot, Cal felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. Sarah had trusted him with her daughter's life, believed in him even after everything fell apart. He wouldn't fail her again. "Get some rest," he told Lily gently. "You're safe here, I promise." She nodded, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. As she lay back down, she murmured, "Mom was right about you." Cal watched her drift off, his mind racing. Sarah's daughter, the last witness to their latest atrocity, a second chance to expose the truth. But first he had to keep her alive. And if he knew anything about the people hunting her, they wouldn't stop until they found her. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the Mojave, bringing with it another scorching day. But in the fortified back room of the Devil's Spur, Cal settled back into his guard position, more alert than ever. Sarah's final act of defiance had led her daughter to his door. He wouldn't waste this chance at redemption. Morning light crept through the high windows, painting golden rectangles on the clubhouse's worn floorboards. Cal watched as Lily sat cross-legged on the cot, her small hands fidgeting with the edge of the blanket he'd given her. The night's restless sleep had left dark circles under her eyes, but there was something different about her now, a readiness to speak that hadn't been there before. "My mom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "She used to tell me stories about a good man who got blamed for bad things." Her eyes met Cal's, steady and sure. "She said you tried to save people, but they turned it around, made everyone think you did the hurting instead." Cal's throat tightened. He lowered himself onto an old wooden chair, trying to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. "Your mother, she worked there when it happened?" Lily nodded. She was different from the others. She kept records of everything they did wrong. Hidden ones. Her fingers twisted in the blanket. "She said you were trying to help her get the truth out when they got to her first." The weight of 15 years of guilt pressed down on Cal's shoulders. "I should have moved faster," he said quietly. "Should have known they were onto us." "She didn't blame you," Lily said with surprising firmness. "She made sure I knew that. She said you were the only one brave enough to stand up to them." A tear rolled down her cheek. "The night before they took her away, she made me memorize your face from an old newspaper. Said if I ever got free, I had to find you." Cal's hands were trembling again. He clasped them together, trying to still them. "Why me, Lily? After all this time, why trust me?" Lily's answer came soft but clear. "Because you're not the monster they say. That's what Mom told me. She said you protect people who can't protect themselves, even when it costs you everything." The words hit him like a physical blow. For 15 years, he'd carried the weight of his failure, believing he'd let Sarah down, let all those people down. He'd accepted his exile, his reputation, thinking it was what he deserved. But Sarah had seen something else. She'd seen enough to trust him with what mattered most, her daughter's life. The morning light seemed brighter somehow, more intense. Cal found himself blinking back unexpected moisture from his eyes. This child, this living testament to Sarah's faith in him, had crossed miles of desert to find him. Not because of blood or biology, but because of something deeper. A promise made years ago, a trust that transcended time and tragedy. Before he could respond, heavy boots thudded down the hallway. The door burst open, and Joey, one of his youngest scouts, stood there breathing hard. "Grim," he gasped. "We got company coming. 3 black SUVs just turned off the highway. No markings, government plates." Cal was on his feet instantly, years of training taking over. He checked his watch, 6:15 in the morning. Too early for casual visitors, too organized for random trouble. "How far out?" he demanded. "Maybe 10 minutes, way they're moving," Joey replied. "They're taking the back road in, trying to be subtle about it." Lily had gone rigid on the cot, her face pale. "They found me," she whispered. "They always find me." Cal moved to her side, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Not this time, little one. Not ever again." He turned to Joey. "Get everyone in position. Protocol 4. Joey's eyes widened. Protocol 4 was their highest defensive stance. "You're not thinking of running?" "No." Cal's voice was steel now, all uncertainty gone. "We're done running. They want to come here? Let them come." He looked back at Lily, saw Sarah's trust reflected in those young eyes. "But they're not taking anyone else. Not from here. Not today." Joey nodded and disappeared down the hall, shouting orders. The sounds of preparation echoed through the clubhouse. Metal doors sliding shut, weapons being distributed, positions being taken. Cal helped Lily to her feet. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," he said gently. "A place they can't reach. Will you trust me?" She slipped her small hand into his large one. "Mom did," she said simply. Moving swiftly but calmly, Cal led her through the clubhouse's back passages. The morning sun streamed through narrow windows, casting their shadows long against the walls. Each step took them further from the approaching threat, but Cal wasn't running. Not this time. This time he was making a stand. Sarah's words, carried across years by her daughter's voice, had awakened something he'd thought long dead. He wasn't just protecting Lily because she needed it, or because Sarah had asked it. He was protecting her because it was who he truly was. Not the monster of their lies, but the guardian they'd failed to destroy. As he secured Lily in the hidden room behind the old freezer, checking the escape tunnel that led to the desert beyond, Cal felt a certainty he hadn't known in years. The title that had been his curse, Grim, suddenly felt different. Not a mark of shame, but a promise. A promise to Sarah, to Lily, to himself. The sound of vehicles on gravel drifted through the walls. Cal checked his weapons one last time, made sure Lily had water and the emergency radio. "Stay quiet," he told her. "No matter what you hear. If I don't come back in 2 hours, take the tunnel. The others will find you." "You'll come back," she said with that same surprising certainty. "Mom said you always keep your promises." Cal touched her cheek gently, then turned to face what was coming. The central conflict he'd avoided for 15 years had finally found him. But this time he wasn't alone. This time, he had something worth fighting for. Not just survival, but redemption. As he walked back through the clubhouse, his people nodded to him, ready and waiting. The morning sun blazed through the windows, and Cal Grim Harlan prepared to meet his destiny. Not with fear or anger, but with the calm certainty of a man who had finally found his true purpose. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the Devil's Spur as Cal gathered his most trusted allies in the clubhouse's main room. The morning's confrontation had been averted when the unmarked vehicles suddenly changed course, but Cal knew it was only temporary. They'd be back, better prepared, and in greater numbers. Around the scarred wooden table sat 4 people he trusted with his life, and more importantly, with Lily's. Big Mike, a former Marine Scout sniper, his gray beard neatly trimmed despite his weathered leather vest. Next to him, Sarah Chen, who'd quit her job as an emergency room nurse after reporting one too many suspicious injuries and getting stonewalled by the authorities. Tommy Doc Wilson, who'd traded his federal marshal's badge for a desert chapel after seeing too much corruption, sat, quietly, with his Bible close at hand. And finally, Jake Ghost Peterson, whose intelligence work in Afghanistan had left him with both tactical skills and deep moral scars. "They're using children," Cal said quietly, spreading out old newspaper clippings and hastily scrawled notes. Not just holding them, experimenting on them. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "I knew something was wrong. Those kids that came through the ER, the injuries didn't match the stories, and when I tried to investigate, cases would just disappear." "Because they never existed officially," Ghost added, his voice rough from years of desert dust. "Black sites don't keep records, at least not ones anyone can find." Through the window, Cal could see Lily in the courtyard, carefully tended by Maria, Big Mike's wife. The old woman had coaxed the first real smile from the girl by showing her how to feed the desert songbirds that visited their makeshift garden. "She's starting to trust us," Doc observed, following Cal's gaze. "Amazing how resilient children can be, given half a chance." Cal nodded, turning back to the table. "What she's told me, it matches pieces I've been collecting for 15 years. The task force that framed me, they never shut down. They just went deeper underground, expanded their operation." "But why children?" Sarah asked, her medical training evident in her precise questions. "The injuries I saw weren't random. They were systematic, like they were testing something," Ghost finished. "Responses to stress, maybe. Pain thresholds. The kind of thing you'd do if you were trying to create—" "Soldiers," Cal cut in. "Perfect little soldiers who'd follow orders without question, who'd never break under pressure because they were broken already." The room fell silent as the horror of it sank in. Big Mike's huge hands gripped the table edge until his knuckles went white. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "He's not in this," Doc said grimly. "This is all human evil." Cal pulled out more papers, locations, dates, patterns he'd pieced together during his years of exile. "The massacre they blamed me for. I think Lily saw what really happened. She's described details only someone who was there could know." "Which makes her the only living witness," Ghost said. "No wonder they want her back so badly." Sarah leaned forward. "We could run. I've got contacts up north, safe houses." But Cal was already shaking his head. "Running won't stop them. They'll keep doing this to other children. We need to expose everything. The experiments, the cover-ups, all of it." "That's suicide," Big Mike growled, but there was respect in his voice. "They'll come at us with everything they've got." "Good," Cal said simply. "Let them come where we're ready, where we choose the ground. And this time, we'll have proof." Doc thumbed through his Bible, stopping at a marked page. "David against Goliath," he murmured. "Everyone forgets. David didn't just survive. He won." The afternoon wore on as they planned, each contributing their expertise. Sarah detailed medical evidence she'd preserved despite orders to destroy it. Ghost outlined communication protocols and safe data transmission methods. Big Mike and his veterans mapped defense positions and escape routes. Doc listed trusted journalists and legal contacts who'd listen without alerting the wrong people. Throughout it all, Cal kept one eye on Lily, watching her slowly bloom under Maria's gentle care. The girl was showing another side now, curious, observant, even helping to water the scraggly desert flowers Maria somehow kept alive. "She's the key to all of it," Cal said finally. "Not just her testimony, but what she represents. Every child they've hurt, every life they've destroyed. She's their living proof." "And their biggest threat," Ghost added. "A witness they can't control or discredit." Sarah stood up, stretching after hours of planning. "I'll start documenting her injuries properly, build a medical record they can't dispute. But Cal—" She hesitated. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." Cal watched as Lily carefully helped Maria gather eggs from their small chicken coop, her movements precise and gentle. "I've been living with no way back for 15 years, he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to start moving forward instead." The sun was setting now, painting the desert in fierce oranges and reds. One by one, Cal's allies stood, each committed to their roles in what was to come. They weren't just planning a defense anymore. They were preparing to bring down the very people who'd thought themselves untouchable. Big Mike clasped Cal's shoulder as he left. "Whatever comes, brother, we're with you." "All the way," Ghost affirmed, while Doc simply nodded, his faith requiring no words. Sarah was the last to leave, pausing at the door. "I'll have the medical kit ready, just try not to need it." Cal watched them go, then went to collect Lily from the courtyard. She came to him without hesitation now, taking his hand as naturally as breathing. "Maria showed me how to feed the birds," she said, her voice stronger than it had been days ago. "They're not scared anymore." "No," Cal agreed, looking at this child who'd survived so much and still found joy in simple things. They know when they're safe. The desert night was falling fast now, stars appearing in the deepening blue. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, Cal felt the rightness of their chosen path. They weren't just hiding anymore. They were standing up, standing together, ready to fight not just for survival, but for justice. Lily tugged his hand, pointing at a bright evening star. In that moment, Cal understood what Sarah had known all those years ago. He wasn't the monster they'd painted him to be. He was exactly who he needed to be, at exactly the right time, for exactly the right reason. The task force had created their own worst nightmare, not through their experiments, but through their betrayal of a good man who now had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The desert evening painted long shadows across the landscape as Cal guided his motorcycle down rarely used back roads, Lily secure in front of him. He'd modified the seat with a makeshift harness, and her small hands gripped the padded crossbar with determination. The wind carried the scent of creosote and cooling sand as they headed toward Ghost's isolated compound, a place few knew existed. "You okay?" Cal asked during a brief stop, helping Lily sip from a water bottle. She nodded, her face serious. "Are the bad men coming to the bar?" "Probably, but they won't find what they're looking for." Cal's voice was gentle but firm. "That's why we're getting you somewhere safer first." They continued their journey as the sun sank lower, the desert transforming from harsh browns to soft purples and deep blues. The motorcycle's rumble echoed off rocky outcrops, then faded into the vast emptiness. Cal felt Lily gradually relax against him, her initial tension easing with each mile that separated them from danger. After an hour of careful navigation through unmarked trails, they arrived at a modest adobe structure nestled against red rock formations. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and a small garden survived in the shelter of stone walls. Ghost's refuge looked abandoned to casual observers, but Cal knew better. Inside, the house was cool and surprisingly comfortable. Sarah had already stocked it with supplies, fresh clothes for Lily, medical supplies, and enough food for weeks. Cal helped Lily settle in, watching as she cautiously explored the small bedroom prepared for her. "It's quiet here," she said, running her hand along a colorful quilt. "That's the idea. Ghost chose this place because it's hard to find unless you know exactly where to look." Lily sat on the bed, her feet dangling. Her next question came out barely above a whisper. "Cal, does God let bad men win?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Cal lowered himself to sit beside her, the bed creaking under his weight. He stayed silent for a long moment, wrestling with his own long-buried doubts. "I used to think so," he admitted finally. "When bad things happened, I got angry at God, stopped believing for a while." He looked down at his weathered hands. "But lately, I'm starting to think maybe he works in ways we don't always see right away." "Like what?" "Like putting good people in our path when we need them most. Like giving us strength to keep going when things are hard." Cal's voice grew softer. "Like making sure a brave little girl found her way to people who could help her." Lily considered this, her face thoughtful. "My mom used to say God doesn't promise to stop bad things, but he promises to be with us through them." Cal felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling, a light penetrating darkness he'd lived with, so long he'd forgotten it wasn't natural. "Your mom sounds very wise." "She is." Lily paused. "Was." Her lower lip trembled slightly. Cal gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "We're going to make things right, Lily. Not just for you, but for your mom and everyone else they've hurt. That's a promise." After getting Lily settled with dinner and making sure she was comfortable with Sarah, who would stay with her, Cal prepared for his return journey. The task ahead was dangerous. He would deliberately make himself visible, drawing attention away from Lily's actual location. But first, there was work to be done. In Ghost's secure computer room, Sarah laid out the evidence they'd begun gathering. "These are the medical records I managed to save," she explained, spreading out papers covered in clinical terminology and official stamps. Dates, procedures, signatures, all documenting things that should never have been done to children. Ghost had been busy too. He played snippets of audio recordings, conversations between task force members that revealed their true nature. "Encrypted and backed up in 3 different locations," he confirmed. "They can't make these disappear." Cal studied a series of photographs showing the facility where they'd held Lily and others. The images were damning. Security measures meant to contain, not protect. Medical equipment that had no place in a children's facility. "I've reached out to Catherine Chen," Ghost said, referring to an investigative journalist known for exposing government misconduct. "She's willing to meet tomorrow morning. Says she's been trying to crack this story for years but never had solid evidence." "Now she'll have more than evidence," Cal said. "She'll have a witness." As night fell completely, Cal prepared to leave. Sarah caught his arm before he mounted his motorcycle. "Be careful. They'll be watching for you." "That's the idea." His smile was grim but determined. The ride back was solitary, giving Cal time to think. The faith he'd abandoned years ago was stirring again, not in dramatic revelations but in quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, he was no longer just surviving. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. The stars emerged one by one above him, countless points of light in the vast desert sky. Somewhere ahead, the task force waited, believing they still held all the power. But everything had changed. They didn't realize that their perfect witness had escaped, that their secrets were already documented, that their time of accountability was approaching. Cal guided his motorcycle towards the distant lights of town, ready to play his part in the unfolding plan. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, hope was building, not just for justice, but for redemption. Back at Ghost's compound, Lily slept peacefully under Sarah's watchful care, safe beneath the same star-filled sky. And somewhere in the darkness between them, a journalist named Catherine Chen was reviewing her notes, preparing for a meeting that would change everything. The desert morning arrived with gentle warmth, painting the landscape in soft golden hues. Inside Ghost's secure compound, Cal sat at the kitchen table, carefully reviewing the legal documents spread before him. His large hands, more accustomed to gripping handlebars than holding pens, moved methodically across each page as he checked every detail. Sarah brought him a fresh cup of coffee, the aroma filling the quiet kitchen. "How's she doing?" Cal asked, glancing toward the bedroom where Lily was getting ready. "Nervous but brave," Sarah replied, her nurse's instincts evident in her careful assessment. "She slept through the night. First time since she got here." Lily emerged from the bedroom, wearing clean clothes Sarah had brought. Simple jeans and a purple t-shirt that made her look like any other 7-year-old. But her eyes held wisdom beyond her years as she approached the table. "Ready to practice again?" Cal asked gently. Lily nodded, climbing onto a chair. They'd spent the early morning hours preparing, helping her organize her memories into clear statements that would hold up under scrutiny. Sarah sat nearby, offering encouraging smiles when Lily's voice wavered. "Start from the beginning," Cal prompted, keeping his voice steady and calm. Lily took a deep breath. "I was taken to the facility 3 months ago. They told my mom it was a special school for gifted children." Her small fingers traced patterns on the wooden table as she spoke. "The first thing they did was take away our regular clothes and give us uniforms with numbers." Cal made notes, his jaw tightening at details he'd heard before, but still found difficult to bear. "You're doing great, Lily. Can you describe the daily routine?" "Wake-up was at 6 o'clock every morning. They would check our temperatures and give us pills." Lily's voice grew stronger as she continued, the practice sessions helping her maintain focus. "Then there were tests, blood draws, scans, and—" She hesitated, looking at her arm where fading needle marks told their own story. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. "Take your time, sweetheart. They said we were helping make medicine better, but it hurt, and some kids got really sick." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "2 of them didn't come back." Cal set down his pen, fighting to maintain his composed exterior. "You're very brave to tell us this, Lily. The truth you're sharing will help make sure this doesn't happen to other children." The morning progressed steadily as they refined Lily's testimony. Ghost had set up recording equipment to document everything, creating multiple secure copies. By late morning, the compound was ready for Catherine Chen's arrival. The journalist arrived precisely at 11 o'clock, her professional demeanor softening when she saw Lily. Catherine had built her career exposing corruption, but nothing had prepared her for what she was about to hear. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she said, setting up her recording equipment with practiced efficiency. "I want you both to know that your safety is my primary concern. Everything we discuss will be handled with absolute discretion." For the next several hours, Catherine listened as Lily recounted her experience. The journalist's hands trembled slightly as she took notes, her face growing increasingly pale at each new revelation. When Lily described the massacre she'd witnessed, the same one Cal had been framed for years ago, Catherine had to pause the interview. "I need a moment," she said, stepping outside briefly to compose herself. Cal used the break to check on Lily. "You okay, kiddo?" Lily nodded, then surprised him by reaching for his hand. "You're not scary at all," she said matter-of-factly. "Can I call you Uncle Cal? Sarah said I should ask first." The simple request caught Cal off guard, stirring emotions he'd thought long buried. "I'd like that," he managed to say, his voice rough with feeling. When Catherine returned, they moved on to reviewing the evidence Ghost and Sarah had gathered. The journalist's eyes widened at the medical records, the photographs, the recorded conversations that proved years of systematic abuse. "This is—" Catherine shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is bigger than anything I've ever covered. The implications—" She looked at Cal. "They framed you because you tried to stop them, didn't you?" "I was a federal marshal then," Cal confirmed quietly. "Discovered what they were doing, tried to shut it down. They made sure no one would believe me." Catherine's determination visibly strengthened. "They won't get away with it this time. I have connections at major news outlets, contacts in the Justice Department who've been waiting for something solid like this." The afternoon light was starting to soften when Catherine finally packed up her equipment. She'd spent hours meticulously copying every document, recording multiple interviews, and establishing a secure communication protocol. "I'll begin the publication process tonight," she promised, standing at the door. "My team has safe houses ready if needed. Once this breaks, you'll have the full protection of public attention, the best security there is." Lily, who had grown increasingly comfortable throughout the day, gave Catherine a small hug goodbye. Thank you for believing us." "Thank you for being so brave," Catherine replied, her professional composure cracking slightly. As they watched Catherine's car disappear down the desert road, Cal felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that came from violence and revenge, but something cleaner, brighter. The truth, so long buried, was finally finding its way to light. "Uncle Cal?" Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Did we do good?" Cal looked down at her upturned face, seeing not just the trauma she'd endured, but the strength that had brought her through it. "Yeah, little one," he said softly. "We did real good." Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Who's ready for dinner? I made macaroni and cheese." "With the crunchy stuff on top?" Lily asked hopefully, her serious demeanor dissolving into simple childhood enthusiasm. "Extra crunchy," Sarah confirmed with a smile. As they headed inside, Cal took one last look at the desert horizon. The truth was in motion now, carried by Catherine's determination and Lily's courage. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to believe that justice might come not through force, but through the simple, powerful act of speaking truth. The desert stars were just beginning to emerge when the first signs of trouble appeared. Cal noticed it during his routine perimeter check, the subtle shift in radio chatter, the distant thrum of helicopters barely audible over the evening wind. "Something's wrong," he muttered, reaching for his satellite phone to warn the others. The line was dead. So was his backup cell. The landline gave only static. Inside the safe house, Lily was helping Sarah clean up after dinner, carefully drying each plate with determined concentration. The domesticity of the scene made what happened next even more jarring. The flashbangs came first, shattering windows and filling rooms with disorienting light and sound. Then came the coordinated breach, doors bursting open on all sides as tactical teams poured in, wearing federal patches and night vision gear. "Federal agents, on the ground!" Cal moved instinctively to shield Lily, but rubber bullets caught him in the chest and legs, driving him down. Through the chaos, he heard Lily screaming, not in fear, but in rage. "They're the bad ones," she shouted. "They're lying. They're the ones who hurt us." Sarah tried to document the raid with her phone, but an agent knocked it from her hands, crushing it under his boot. "Sarah Martinez," he announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap a minor and obstruction of justice." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists as she protested. "I'm a licensed nurse. I have rights." Cal struggled against the agents holding him down, watching helplessly as they carried Lily away. Her small fists beat against the tactical vest of her captor. "Uncle Cal," she cried out, "don't let them take me back there." But there was nothing he could do. The raid was perfectly orchestrated, completely legal on paper. Through the ringing in his ears, Cal heard them reading his rights, listing charges that painted him as a monster, kidnapping, endangering a minor, interfering with a federal investigation. Outside, news vans were already arriving, their lights adding to the strobing chaos. Cal caught glimpses of the headlines scrolling across their sides. "Fugitive biker gang member kidnaps child." "Federal task force rescues girl from notorious criminal." Hours passed in a blur of processing and interrogation. By midnight, Cal sat alone in a holding cell as Waisin's thoughts racing. Where had they taken Lily? What happened to the evidence? Catherine should have broken the story by now, unless... Dawn brought the answers he feared. The morning news played on a small TV in the station, showing his booking photo alongside lurid speculation about his motives. But it was the smaller story that made his blood run cold. Local journalist Catherine Chen reported missing, car found abandoned. They'd erased everything, every document, every recording, every witness. The truth had been buried again, deeper this time, sealed under layers of legitimate-looking warrants and official statements. They released him that morning, a calculated move that surprised him until he understood why. Without evidence, without witnesses, without credibility, he was more useful to them free. His very freedom would be seen as proof of Lily's delusions and Sarah's conspiracy theories. The ride back to the clubhouse was a study in devastation. The place had been thoroughly searched, everything of value taken or destroyed. In the main room, morning light filtered through broken windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. Cal stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of hope, and felt something inside him break. His knees hit the floor, not in prayer, he was past that now, but in pure defeat. They'd won. Again. And somewhere out there, Lily was back in their hands, believing he had failed to protect her. The silence of the empty clubhouse pressed in around him. No sounds of Sarah's gentle reassurance, no echo of Lily's determined voice practicing her testimony, no rustle of Catherine's papers as she documented the truth. Just silence, and the weight of failure, and the knowledge that evil had triumphed once again. Cal's hands clenched into fists against the floor, his shoulders shaking with grief and rage. The morning sun continued its climb, indifferent to the darkness that had descended on his soul. In the distance, a police siren wailed briefly and fell silent, a mocking reminder of justice perverted. The taste of defeat was familiar, but this time it was different. This time he'd allowed himself to hope. This time he'd believed in the power of truth. This time he'd opened his heart to trust and faith, only to have it all stripped away in one calculated night of legal violence. The empty clubhouse held no answers, no comfort, no path forward. Just the echoing reminder that sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the monsters wear badges and carry warrants. Sometimes all the hope in the world isn't enough to stop the machinery of corruption. Cal remained there, on his knees, as the morning light crept across the floor. A broken man in a broken place, crushed under the weight of a system too powerful to fight and too corrupt to change. The morning after the raid stretched endlessly before Cal, each minute an exercise in self-torture. He paced the wreckage of the clubhouse, his heavy boots crunching over broken glass and scattered papers. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh light through the broken windows, illuminating the destruction that matched his inner turmoil. "I should have known better," he muttered, running a hand over his face. His reflection caught in a shard of mirror. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper than ever. Should have kept running. Should have stayed alone. Every attempt to help had only made things worse. He'd tried to protect Lily, and now she was back in their hands. He'd trusted the system, gathered evidence, played it legal, and they'd crushed it all with terrifying efficiency. Sarah was in jail, Catherine was missing, and Lily... God, Lily was probably being processed right now, terrorized by men who called themselves helpers. Cal's fist connected with the wall, the pain barely registering. The sound echoed through the empty room, followed by the soft creak of the front door opening. He turned, tensed for confrontation, but it was just Pastor Mike standing there, his weathered cowboy hat in his hands. "Thought I might find you here," the former marshal said quietly, taking in the destruction. "Heard what happened on the news." Cal turned away, unable to face the compassion in the older man's eyes. "Come to tell me I should have known better? That trying to fight the system was foolish?" "No." Pastor Mike's boots scraped across the floor as he approached. "Come to remind you of something you might have forgotten." "Save the sermon," Cal growled. "I'm not in the mood for platitudes." "Not offering any." The preacher settled himself on an overturned chair. Just truth. You remember what I told you when you first came to town? After everything went down with the task force? Cal remained silent, but the memory surfaced anyway. He'd been younger then, fresh from prison, carrying rage like a loaded weapon. I told you that doing right doesn't guarantee safety, Pastor Mike continued. Never has. Look at Daniel in the lion's den, or David running from Saul. Doing right just means doing right, even when it costs everything. And look where that got us, Cal bit out. Lily's back with them. Sarah's in jail. Catherine's probably... He couldn't finish the sentence. You did right by that little girl, Pastor Mike said firmly. You showed her kindness when she needed it, gave her hope when she had none, protected her as long as you could. Fat lot of good that did her. It did more than you know. The preacher leaned forward. You showed her that not all adults are monsters, that some people will fight for what's right, even when it's hard. That's not nothing, Cal. Cal's shoulders slumped. I failed her. No. Pastor Mike's voice took on the authority of his former profession. The system failed her. The corrupt men who abused their power failed her. You stood up. You tried. And now you've got a choice to make. What choice? They've won. They've got all the power, all the authority. Just like they did in Egypt, Pastor Mike interrupted. When Pharaoh's daughter found a baby in the reeds. Just like they did in Persia, when Esther had to choose between safety and saving her people. Cal turned, something stirring in his memory. My mother, she used to read me Bible stories. Smart woman. Pastor Mike nodded. Remember Proverbs 31, verse 8? Cal's voice was rough as he recited. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. The verse goes on, Pastor Mike said quietly. Speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Cal closed his eyes, seeing Lily's face, hearing her trust when she called him Uncle Cal, remembering her mother's belief in him passed down like a sacred charge. I can't fight the whole system, Cal said, but his voice held less defeat than before. No one's asking you to. Pastor Mike stood, placing his hat back on his head. Just asking you to do what's right, to keep standing up for one little girl who needs someone in her corner. Cal opened his eyes, really looking at the destruction around him. Among the scattered papers, he spotted one of Lily's drawings, a careful sketch of himself, standing tall, with the word hero written in childish letters. They think they've won, he said slowly, think they've buried everything again. People who abuse power always think they've won, Pastor Mike replied, right up until they don't. Cal picked up the drawing, folding it carefully and tucking it into his vest pocket. Something was shifting inside him, like tectonic plates realigning. His mother's Bible verses, Lily's trust, his own buried sense of justice, all coming together into a clear purpose. I need to make some calls, he said, straightening to his full height. Get the old crew together. Pastor Mike nodded, a glint of his martial days showing through. I'll put the word out. Sarah's got friends at the hospital. Catherine's got colleagues who'll ask questions. We're not done yet. Cal moved with new purpose, pulling out his phone. The weight of failure was still there, but something else was rising stronger. Resolve, determination, and a clarity he hadn't felt in years. One last stand, he said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. One last stand, Pastor Mike agreed, heading for the door. And Cal, remember, doing right might not guarantee safety, but it does require courage. Looks like you found yours again. Cal watched him go, then began dialing numbers. One by one, his allies would gather. One by one, they would stand together. And this time, they wouldn't fight with just truth and evidence. They would fight with the fierce determination of those who had nothing left to lose and everything right to do. In his pocket, Lily's drawing pressed against his heart like a badge of purpose. The morning light caught the edges of broken glass, turning them to diamonds, and Cal felt the last pieces of his doubt fall away. They had tried to bury him in darkness twice now. This time he would rise, and he wouldn't rise alone. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Cal checked his watch for the third time. 3 o'clock sharp, right on schedule. He touched the small recording device in his hand, the one Lily had kept hidden in her stuffed bear throughout her captivity. Her quiet voice had captured everything. Locations, names, procedures. The truth, preserved by a child's instinct for survival. "You ready?" Sarah, the retired nurse, stood beside him in her crisp white uniform. Behind her, Pastor Mike adjusted his collar, and Catherine, the social worker, organized her files. "Been ready for 20 years, Cal replied, his voice steady. Across the state, at precisely 3 o'clock, dozens of emails went out simultaneously. Churches received detailed accounts of child abuse. Veterans groups got coordinates and building layouts. State investigators found themselves flooded with time-stamped evidence of illegal detention facilities. No leather vests today. No motorcycles. Cal had chosen his army carefully. Professionals in business attire, former law enforcement, medical personnel, people whose testimony couldn't be dismissed as criminal conspiracy. "First wave should be hitting the news now," Catherine said, checking her phone. Social media was already lighting up with the story. Local news vans were mobilizing. They approached the unmarked facility in a convoy of sensible sedans and SUVs. Cal led them right up to the front gate, where security cameras couldn't help but record their arrival. Behind the fence, men in tactical gear shifted nervously. "My name is Cal Harlan," he announced clearly, knowing every word was being recorded. "I have with me 32 witnesses to illegal detention and abuse of minors at this facility. We are here to peacefully demand accountability." Pastor Mike stepped forward, his former marshal's badge catching the sunlight. "We have copies of all evidence in secure locations. Trying to silence us will only trigger more releases." The guards spoke quietly into their radios. In the distance, sirens began to wail, but not the usual local police. These were different. State police, federal agents, oversight committees alerted by the flood of evidence. Sarah stood tall beside Cal, her nurse's credentials visible. "We have medical records, proof of unauthorized procedures on minors, documentation of injuries inconsistent with legal care protocols." More vehicles approached, news vans now, their satellite dishes stretching skyward. Helicopters chopped through the air above. The truth was spreading, impossible to contain. Cal thought of Lily, safe now in a secure location with trusted protectors. Her quiet courage had made this possible. Her careful attention to detail, recording everything she saw and heard, had given them the weapon they needed. Truth, undeniable and overwhelming. The facility's gates opened slowly. Men in suits emerged, their faces tight with controlled panic. Behind them, Cal could see others rushing to destroy evidence, but it was too late. The truth was already out there, multiplying across thousands of screens and servers. "We have state police incoming," Catherine announced, loud enough for the cameras now recording everything, along with representatives from 3 oversight committees and the Attorney General's office. The men in suits stopped short, realizing they were surrounded not by angry bikers they could paint as criminals, but by professionals with credentials and evidence. The time for shadows had passed. This would all happen in the bright light of day. Cal stood perfectly still as official vehicles began arriving, their lights flashing in the afternoon sun. Not the corrupt local authorities who had helped cover everything up, but state and federal agents responding to the overwhelming public pressure. "Mr. Harlan?" A woman in a crisp FBI windbreaker approached. "We'd like to take your statement. All of your statements." She looked at the assembled group with professional interest. "I believe we have a lot to discuss." Cal nodded, feeling the weight of 20 years of injustice beginning to lift. Not through violence or revenge, but through the simple, unstoppable power of truth brought into light. The afternoon sun continued its slow arc across the sky as more official vehicles arrived. The facility's staff was being detained, computers seized, records secured. Cal watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction, knowing that somewhere a brave little girl named Lily had helped make this moment possible. The next week unfolded like a slow avalanche of truth. One by one, task force members were led away in handcuffs, their carefully constructed walls of secrecy crumbling. Cal watched from a distance as federal agents swarmed the facilities, boxes of evidence carried out under the hot desert sun. In a safe room at the courthouse, Lily sat with child advocates and told her story. Her voice was steady now, supported by professionals who knew how to help traumatized children speak their truth. She pointed to photos, named names, and described places with the precise detail that only a child's memory could preserve. "You're doing so well, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, holding her hand through the tough moments. The official apology came on a Wednesday. Cal stood in the Justice Department's conference room as the Attorney General personally acknowledged the wrongful conviction and announced his complete exoneration. 20 years of guilt and shadow were lifted with a few formal words and the stroke of a pen. "The record now reflects the truth, Mr. Harlan," the Attorney General said, handing him the official documentation. "You tried to prevent that massacre. You were a witness, not a perpetrator." Pastor Mike squeezed his shoulder as reporters scribbled notes and cameras flashed. Cal said little, letting the moment speak for itself. By Friday, the last of the corrupt officials had been arrested. The task force that had operated in darkness for so long was exposed, its members scattered or in custody. Justice moved slowly, but it moved with certainty now. When it was all over, when the last reporter had packed up their camera and the courthouse steps were empty, Cal found Lily waiting in the church office, where Pastor Mike had been keeping her safe. "Uncle Cal!" She ran to him without hesitation, no trace of fear in her movements now. Her smile was bright, unguarded. He lifted her carefully, this small prophet who had helped truth find its way into light. The room was quiet except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan and distant church bells. "You're really staying?" she asked. "Really staying," he confirmed. The silence that settled around them was different now, not the heavy silence of secrets, but the peaceful quiet of truth finally spoken, and justice finally done. The winter rains transformed the Mojave, painting the desert floor with delicate wildflowers in shades of purple and gold. Cal stood on the porch of Hope Haven, the sanctuary he'd built from the remains of his old life, watching children play in the late afternoon sun. The building itself wasn't much. An old ranch house expanded with careful planning and volunteer labor. But its purpose made it beautiful. Solar panels glinted on the roof, powering the security systems that kept everyone safe. A garden flourished behind the kitchen, tended by the same hands that had once gripped handlebars and weapons. Lily's laughter rang out across the yard as she helped younger children plant sunflower seeds in paper cups. At 9 years old now, she'd grown taller and stronger, her eyes bright with purpose instead of fear. She wore her dark hair in neat braids, done each morning by Sarah, the retired nurse who now served as the Haven's medical director. Former club members, who'd chosen to stand with Cal during the darkness, now worked as guardians and mentors. They taught the children useful skills, mechanics, carpentry, even music. The kids called them uncles without hesitation, seeing past the tattoos to the gentle hearts beneath. "Look, Uncle Cal," Lily called out, holding up a cup where tiny green shoots were just beginning to emerge. "They're growing," Cal nodded, his weathered face softening into a smile. The scars he carried, both visible and hidden, hadn't vanished, but they'd become markers of survival, proof that light could pierce any darkness. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, Cal found himself doing something that had once seemed impossible: praying. Not out of desperation or fear, but with gratitude. The evening air carried the scent of desert sage and cooking dinner as children's voices drifted through open windows. He watched the golden light paint the horizon, thinking how strange it was that the man once known as Grim had become a source of shelter. The most feared member of his old life now dedicated his days to protecting the innocent. There was peace in that knowledge, not the false peace of forgetting, but the true peace of purpose finally found. Lily appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his calloused one. Together they watched the sunset paint the sky in colors as vibrant as the wild flowers below. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.